Hello everybody. Next up we've got our last game of the year on Friday the 30th, where we'll play host to Brentford. Kick-off's at 7:45pm, but it's not on any of the usual TV channels. Trains? Damn do I know. Virtually impossible to tell the difference between when they're running and when they're not these days. So Brentford then. They currently sit in 10th position, having won 4, drawn 8 and lost 4, giving them 20 points. That's 6 more points than we've got. We've won precisely the same number of games, but they've managed to get 6 more draws. Their last outing saw them go 2-0 up against Spurs, and then sit back with their feet up, only to hand the momentum to their visitors, having thought that the job was done. Sound familiar? Daisy had her work cut out sorting the wheat from the chaff from their signings in the summer window. Until this summer, they had no proper academy system, preferring to run a B team outside the usual competition structure. A change in Premier League rules meant that they would no longer be able to operate under that sort of structure, and although the B team still exists, it runs alongside the more usual age group rates. Daisy's headache was to work out which of the 20 new arrivals were there to fill up the academy pool, and which were first team contenders. I think it's fair to say that if you spend £17 million on a player, he's likely to be a first-teamer. And this was the deal with Aaron Hickley, a Scottish international, which means he didn't go anywhere warm with his compatriots this winter. He spent the last 2 years at Bologna, having come through the youth system at Hearts. It was claimed that he rejected Bayern for Bologna, who he joined for £1.5 million a few years ago. He's usually employed at left-back, but he's likely to miss this one through injury. England under-21 cap Keane Lewis Potter came in from Hull. Listed as a striker but often employed on the left, he has yet to open his account for the Bees in the 7 games in which he's featured either as a starter or sub this season. They will no doubt be hoping for a bit more from a signing that cost £16 million. This was £16 million more than they paid for Lazio keeper Thomas Strakosha. I suppose in some respects they've had their money's worth out of the Greek-born Albanian international. He's just played the 1 League Cup game so far. Injury has curtailed his attempts to challenge current custodian David Raya for the number 1 slot. Strakosha is said to be close to a return, and we may see him in the forthcoming cup match. Another freebie was the signing of central defender Ben Mee, the expiry of whose contract with Burnley happily coincided with their relegation. He actually spent some time last term in the role of caretaker assistant manager at Turf Moor after Sean Dyche had found the door shut with a note and a P45 pinned to it, him having popped out for a packet of tunes. It would have been amusing to have seen him made manager and then not offer himself a new contract. Still, he'd have to go some to better post-war striker Ivor Broadis, who, as a player manager for Carlisle, actually somehow managed to sell himself to Sunderland. Danish winger Mikael Damsgaard arrived from Sampdoria for another £16.7 million, or whatever the sterling equivalent of 15 million euros is these days. He is safely ensconced in the Danish international squad and spent much of the last month or so out in Qatar. We shouldn't go much further without having a word about top scorer Ivan Toney. Now, as I write this, he's facing a few charges regarding his involvement in betting on matches. Well, I say a few. At the moment, the figure stands at 262, though the day is young and there may be more by the time I finish reading this out. There's been little in the way of official comment from Brentford other than to acknowledge the charges. The player has till the 4th of January to respond, and it seems that he'll be using every second of the time given to him as Brentford try to maximise his game time before what is likely to be quite a hefty ban, should the player be found guilty. Enough of them, and we move on to the wild and wacky world of association football. And we're very sad to hear of the demise of George Cohen of 1966 fame. By all accounts, Cohen was a quiet chap who put his strength down to the fact that he used to drink boiled cabbage water as a kid. He was ideal for that 1966 side. Given his pace, he was an integral part of the Sir Alf Ramsey plan to play without conventional wingers. Possibly the funniest story associated with Cohen stems from the time he unwisely elected to kick Ramsey up in the air in a 5-a-side training match. Once Ramsey had picked himself up and counted his limbs, he told Cohen, "If I had another flipping fullback, you wouldn't be playing tomorrow." One suspects that Ramsey was only half joking. Rest in peace, Mr. Kine. And so to us. Well, off the pitch, as the deadline approaches for the club's sell-on clause to expire, we are seeing all sorts of silly season stories about the owners and their intentions. One such tale has Sullivan flogging his share in West Ham to persons unknown and returning to Cardiff, who he tried to buy years ago, only to pull out the deal when the price went up just before the deal was completed. Interestingly, it's said that that deposit that he made in advance of the deal was converted to a loan, which was repayable whenever. History does not record whether the loan attracted interest, and if so, at what rate. Talking of which, Mr. Gold has updated his free autobiography, which is available online somewhere, describing supporters' comments to the effect that he and Sullivan were robbing the side as, quote, irksome, unquote. He goes on to comment that the reason he and Sullivan made loans to the club, and they were interest-bearing, was that neither had Abramovich levels of their own money. Now, I can understand that, but it still does beg the question as to why such high interest rates were charged to the club at a time when Bank of England base rates were at an all-time low. On the pitch, it was a familiar story of not having any plan B up at Arsenal the other night. If ever there were one needed, it was the other night. Sitting back and inviting the opposition onto you will only get you so far, and even then, only then, when your defence doesn't put a foot wrong. When, as happened on Boxing Day, there are goal-conceding errors to factor in, you need to be able to do something else. Instead, we just carried on playing the same way, and with sadly predictable results. And didn't Oliver have a shocker? Never one to shy away from lending a hand to the Big Five plus Spurs. He reached a new low when awarding Arsenal a penalty for the offence of Cresswell handling, or should I say, heading the ball. There were lots of other incidents as well. The yellow card couldn't come out quickly enough for those most innocuous of challenges when committed by a hammer. Yet when Antonio was cynically hauled down with a decent-looking break on, cards were there none. Appalling. On the injury front, Zuma's knee is progressing well, but it'll be February before we see him again. Gamaka is much nearer to return and hopefully be able to give the attack something different. Agerd is recovering from the virus and knocks that he picked up in Qatar, but is close to appearing on Friday. I say close. He's rated at 50-50, but then, well, that's evens in my money. Then there's Cornet. I do hope we haven't got another Dyer on our books. He's now listed as ruled out, despite everyone saying, not long now, ever since he got injured a few months ago. This match will be difficult to predict. I saw Brentford's draw with Spurs on the box, and there were definitely areas I thought we could exploit, judging by the second half. Just a matter of whether the players and management have the will and intelligence to change things when necessary. One thing for sure, we can't carry on like we have been. So to the prediction. All day I've been thinking of a draw, but I'm probably a bit naive, but I would hope that the lessons from Boxing Day will have been learnt. So, for that reason, I'll be giving the £2.50 that I was never going to give to any carol singers on a wager that we will win 2-1. All yours, Mr. Winston. Enjoy the game.
We're here in the offices of a Late Late Show with the host of a Late Late Show, James Corden.
Hi.
Big West Ham fan.
Yes. And big knees up Mother Brown, man.
Yeah.
Get on the forum at kumb.com. Come on, you irons.